On the morning of March 14, 2023, a sense of unease swept across Los Angeles as news spread of a massive fire that had broken out in one of the city's most upscale neighborhoods. It wasn't just any fire, it was an inferno that quickly spiraled out of control, consuming an entire luxury apartment complex within hours. The flames were so intense that they could be seen from miles away, licking the sky with an orange glow that painted the city's skyline in a haunting light. Firefighters arrived at the scene within minutes, but the damage had already begun. Thick black smoke billowed from the building, making it nearly impossible to see through the haze. As emergency crews struggled to contain the blaze, it was clear this fire was unlike anything they had encountered in recent memory. The building was filled with expensive condos, and many of the residents were unable to escape in time. The fire spread so quickly it left some trapped inside, unable to reach safety. By the time the fire was finally put out, more than 50 lives had been lost, and dozens more were injured. The scale of the destruction was staggering. The apartment complex, once a symbol of luxury living, was now nothing more than a charred skeleton of steel and ash. Several floors had collapsed, leaving piles of rubble where families once lived. The heat of the fire had been so extreme that it melted metal frames and warped the structure beyond recognition. What was once a thriving community of residents, many of them professionals and families, was now reduced to a scene of unimaginable loss and devastation. At first, authorities considered the possibility that the fire was the result of an accident. Perhaps a faulty electrical system, a gas leak, or some other technical malfunction had triggered the flames. It was a scenario that could explain how something so destructive could have happened in a building known for its high safety standards. However, as the investigation progressed, the truth became more elusive. The fire didn't seem to follow the pattern of a typical accident. There were too many inconsistencies, too many questions that remained unanswered. What seemed like a tragedy quickly began to look like something far more sinister. Survivors, many of whom had barely escaped with their lives, spoke of hearing strange noises before the fire started, sounds that seemed out of place in such a well-guarded building. One resident reported hearing a loud crash followed by the smell of something burning. Another mentioned seeing a man leaving the building just before the fire erupted, his face hidden by a hoodie. None of these accounts pointed to a clear cause, but together they suggested the possibility that the fire had been deliberately set. As investigators began piecing together the details, they discovered something chilling. The building's security cameras had caught footage of a figure entering the apartment complex in the hours before the fire. The person was seen near the electrical room, where the fire was believed to have started. It was a lead that turned the investigation in a new direction, one that would eventually reveal a much darker, more complex story behind the tragedy. What had once seemed like a random disaster was now being considered as part of a carefully orchestrated scheme. The fire had not been an accident. It had been a calculated act of arson with deadly consequences. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was clear. This fire wasn't just a tragedy, it was a crime. And the true story behind it was far more twisted than anyone had imagined. Emma Reynolds was a woman who seemed to have it all: beauty, charm, and a family that loved her. She was 32 years old, a devoted mother of 2 young children, and married to Robert Reynolds, a well-known real estate developer in Los Angeles. The couple had been together for over a decade, their relationship the envy of many. From the outside, they were the picture of success, living in an elegant home with all the trappings of wealth. They attended charity galas together, traveled to exotic destinations, and presented themselves as a happy, accomplished family. But behind the polished facade, there was something far darker brewing. Emma had been living in the apartment complex that was consumed by the fire. Her life there had started as an escape from the pressures of her marriage. She had moved into the building a few years ago, hoping to find a fresh start after enduring countless issues at home. Robert, despite his charming exterior, had been distant, and Emma had begun to feel isolated in their relationship. The couple had been struggling for months, but they had kept it under wraps. To the outside world, they still appeared to be the perfect couple. However, Emma's private life was unraveling in ways that no one could have predicted. During her time in the apartment, she had grown closer to some of the neighbors. They described her as a kind and caring woman who was always willing to lend a helping hand. But Emma had also started to notice strange things. Robert's behavior had become more erratic, and he had begun spending increasing amounts of time away from home. She had grown suspicious of his late-night meetings and unexplained absences, but when she confronted him, he always had a convenient excuse. There were signs that Emma's suspicions might have been right. One of the building's residents had seen Robert entering the complex on several occasions at odd hours, long after he should have been home. But Robert was always careful, never staying long enough for anyone to ask too many questions. Emma began to feel like she was losing control of her life, and her marriage seemed to be crumbling before her eyes. She started to confide in a few close friends about her fears that Robert might be having an affair. She never named anyone, but it was clear she was troubled by his behavior. What Emma didn't know was that Robert had been seeing another woman for months. Her name was Lily Carter, a 29-year-old artist who had recently moved into the apartment building. Lily was everything Emma was not: spontaneous, carefree, and living in the moment. Robert was drawn to her youthful energy and vibrant personality, and their affair began under the cover of secrecy. They would meet in the late hours of the night when Emma was away on business or handling the children. What started as a simple fling quickly turned into something more dangerous, and Robert became increasingly reckless. But Emma's death in the fire wasn't an accident. She had no idea that the very man she had trusted with her life would be the one to betray her in the most unimaginable way. Emma was not alone in the building that night, but her tragic death in the fire was the catalyst that would unravel the twisted truth of what had really happened. As the investigation into the fire intensified, it became clear that Emma's death was not just a random victim of circumstance. She had been the target. And the more the authorities uncovered about Robert's secret life, the more chilling the story became. Robert had been living a double life, hiding his affair while plotting something far more sinister. An act that would destroy everything Emma had worked for, all while he tried to cover his tracks and escape the consequences of his actions. Emma's death was just the beginning of a much darker story that would shake the foundations of the seemingly perfect life she had once known. Robert Reynolds had always been a man who thrived on control. As a successful real estate developer, he had learned how to manipulate situations to his advantage, whether it was securing lucrative deals or managing the public image of his family. On the surface, his life appeared to be a perfect blend of wealth, success, and stability. However, beneath this carefully curated image lay a man growing increasingly discontent with his life, particularly his marriage to Emma. The tension between them had been building for months, and what was once a promising partnership had become a battleground of hidden resentments and unspoken frustrations. Emma had begun to suspect that something was off, but Robert was always quick to offer reassurance. In truth, Robert had grown bored with his life. Despite the external trappings of success, he felt stifled by the responsibilities of marriage and fatherhood. Emma, once his confidant and partner in life, had become more of an obligation than a source of fulfillment. His eyes had wandered, and he found solace in the arms of someone else, Lily Carter, a 29-year-old artist who had recently moved into the same apartment complex where Emma lived. Lily was everything Emma wasn't: free-spirited, adventurous, and unburdened by the demands of family life. Their affair began innocently enough, with Robert first noticing her at an art exhibit where she showcased her work. Her boldness and youthful energy captivated him, offering a stark contrast to the rigidity of his own life. The affair quickly escalated, becoming a secret that Robert desperately tried to keep hidden from Emma. He would sneak away to see Lily in the dead of night after Emma had gone to bed or when she was away on business trips. Their encounters were full of passion and excitement, a stark contrast to the predictable and staid routine he had with his wife. Lily was everything Robert had been yearning for: someone who didn't ask questions, someone who simply enjoyed the moment. Their time together made him feel alive, but it also fed into his growing dissatisfaction with the life he had built with Emma. As the affair continued, Robert found himself increasingly torn between the two women. The guilt he felt toward Emma began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of entitlement and justification. Lily was the only person who made him feel seen, who made him feel wanted in a way that Emma no longer did. But as their relationship deepened, so did Robert's desperation to maintain his lifestyle without the constraints of his marriage. The financial burden of his family life, combined with the strain of keeping up appearances, had taken its toll. One day, in a moment of reckless honesty, Robert confided in Lily about a plan he had been concocting. He had taken out a large life insurance policy on Emma, one that would pay out millions if anything were to happen to her. Robert had long been dissatisfied with the weight of his obligations, and the thought of escaping them seemed increasingly appealing. Lily, although initially taken aback, saw the opportunity to secure her own future. Robert promised her that if everything went according to plan, she would never have to worry about money again. The two of them could start fresh, free from the constraints of their current lives. What started as an affair built on passion and escape soon morphed into something darker. Robert, now consumed with the desire to rid himself of his marriage, began plotting the unthinkable. He and Lily would set the stage for a disaster that would take Emma's life and leave him with the financial freedom he so desperately craved. Lily, driven by her own motives, was complicit in the plan. She helped Robert set things in motion, advising him on how to cover his tracks and avoid suspicion. The fire that consumed the apartment complex, with Emma trapped inside, was the tragic culmination of their plan. Robert had orchestrated it all, manipulating the circumstances and setting the fuse that would eventually ignite the deadly flames. He had never anticipated the full extent of the destruction. Emma was not the only victim that night. The fire claimed the lives of many others, leaving a trail of devastation far beyond what Robert had ever imagined. In the end, Robert's actions did not just cost him his marriage and his integrity, they cost him his humanity. The affair with Lily, once a source of excitement and escape, had led him down a path of irreversible destruction, and the lives lost in the fire could never be undone. What began as a selfish desire for freedom turned into a nightmare that Robert would never be able to escape. Investigation into the fire that claimed so many lives unfolded. The authorities quickly realized that there was more to the tragedy than initially met the eye. At first they believed it might have been a simple accident, an unforeseen disaster born from faulty wiring, a gas leak, or some other technical malfunction. However, as the fire's origin was traced back to the building's electrical room, the clues began to paint a different picture. This wasn't just any fire, it was too calculated, too methodical for that. Detectives began by reviewing the building's security footage, hoping to find some trace of what had caused the disaster. As the footage from the night of the fire was carefully examined, a chilling discovery was made. The cameras had caught a shadowy figure entering the building just hours before the first flames had been seen. The person appeared to be moving with purpose, heading straight toward the electrical room, where the fire would later be traced back to. The figure, cloaked in darkness, wore a hoodie that obscured their face, making it impossible to identify them at first glance. But there was something else that stood out. The security footage didn't just show a random person entering the building. The same footage revealed a man's car parked outside the complex late in the evening. The car had been parked just outside the building's entrance, and it was a vehicle that was well known to the residents. Robert Reynolds' car. At first, investigators thought it might be a coincidence, but the more they dug, the more disturbing the connections between Robert and the fire became. A deeper investigation into Robert's movements that night raised even more suspicion. Robert had been in the building at the time of the fire, but his presence had been hidden from most of the other residents. Surveillance footage showed him arriving and leaving, but with a few hours unaccounted for. It was clear that he had been in the building long enough for someone to set the fire, but was he simply a witness, or was he the one who had orchestrated it? The most shocking discovery came when a resident came forward with an unsettling memory. One of the tenants of the complex, who had narrowly escaped the flames, recalled seeing Robert in the building late in the evening, standing near the electrical room just hours before the fire started. This was not something that anyone had thought to mention before, as Robert had always been seen as a respectable member of the community. But the connection was impossible to ignore now. Robert's presence near the area where the fire began seemed too coincidental. The investigators, now certain that something was amiss, began looking into Robert's personal life. What they found was deeply troubling. Robert had been hiding a secret that would explain his motives: an affair with a woman named Lily Carter, a 29-year-old artist who had recently moved into the building. Robert had been sneaking around, meeting Lily in secret, and the affair had been going on for several months. The details of their relationship were not public knowledge, and to the outside world, Robert appeared to be the loving husband and father. But inside the confines of his home, his marriage to Emma was unraveling, and his affair with Lily had become a way for him to escape. Robert's motive began to take shape as the investigators connected the dots. He had been facing severe financial pressure, and his marriage was falling apart. Emma, his wife, had started to suspect the affair, and the cracks in their relationship were beginning to show. But there was more. Robert had taken out a life insurance policy on Emma just weeks before the fire, one that would pay out millions if she died. It was clear now that the fire wasn't just a random accident. It was part of a much darker plan. As investigators dug deeper into the connection between Robert and the fire, they also uncovered something even more shocking. Lily, the woman Robert had been having the affair with, was not as innocent as she seemed. She had been at the heart of the conspiracy, playing an active role in the plan. In fact, it was revealed that she had been the one who had set the fire, following Robert's instructions. She had known exactly what to do to start the blaze and make it look like an accident. Together, they had engineered a tragedy that would not only end Emma's life but would allow Robert to claim the life insurance money and start anew with Lily. The connection between Robert, Lily, and the fire became increasingly clear, and the investigation began to shift toward a new theory. This wasn't just an act of arson. It was a carefully planned murder orchestrated by Robert and his lover, with the tragic loss of life being nothing more than collateral damage. What had seemed like a random disaster now appeared to be the result of a calculated scheme driven by greed, betrayal, and a lust for freedom. As the pieces of the puzzle came together, it became evident that the fire was not just a tragedy. It was the result of a chilling conspiracy that had claimed more lives than anyone could have imagined. As the investigation into the deadly fire progressed, the twists and turns in the case grew more disturbing by the day. Authorities had already arrested Robert Reynolds, charging him with arson, insurance fraud, and multiple counts of murder. His affair with Lily Carter had been exposed, and it seemed like the case was nearing its conclusion. Robert's motive appeared clear. He had orchestrated the fire to collect the life insurance money on his wife Emma, and he had involved Lily in the plot. But even as the investigators felt they had uncovered the core of the scheme, something still didn't sit right. There were gaps in the story. Too many questions that remained unanswered. In the weeks that followed Robert's arrest, new evidence emerged that threw everything into question. A key witness, someone who had been interviewed early on in the investigation, came forward with startling information. This person, someone who had been a minor character in the case up until now, revealed that they had seen Lily the night of the fire, but it wasn't what they had initially reported. The witness recalled seeing Lily in the complex in the hours before the fire began, but there was more. Lily had been carrying a large bag, which, at the time, had seemed unremarkable. Now it seemed to hold crucial evidence. Inside the bag were several incendiary devices, the kind that could easily have been used to set the building alight. The witness described Lily as looking nervous, almost frantic, as she entered the building. This new detail shifted the focus of the investigation once again. As investigators dug deeper into Lily's background, they discovered that she wasn't the naive artist she had appeared to be. In fact, Lily had a long history of financial instability and had been struggling to make ends meet for years. It turned out that Robert's promises to help her had gone far beyond mere words. He had promised her a new life, free from debt and worry, and had even hinted that they could build a life together once Emma was gone. But Lily's role in the fire wasn't as simple as being Robert's accomplice. She had her own motives, driven by desperation and a desire for a future that Robert had promised her. What investigators uncovered next was a stunning revelation. Lily had been the one to initiate the idea of the fire in the first place. The truth finally began to unravel when a previously overlooked piece of evidence came to light. A series of emails between Lily and a third, unknown person suggested that she had been communicating with someone else, someone who had played a role in the plot to set the fire. This person was not Robert, but a mysterious figure who had been hired to ensure the fire would succeed. The emails were filled with instructions on how to properly set the fire, including the placement of the incendiary devices and the timing of the ignition. The third person had been an expert in starting fires, someone with a criminal background, and it became clear that Lily had sought help in executing her plan. It wasn't just Robert who had been involved in the murder, it was Lily, her secret ally, and the tragic situation that had been set in motion. The twist came when it was revealed that the mysterious figure was, in fact, a former associate of Robert's. Someone he had known years earlier when he was involved in some shady business dealings. This connection suggested that Robert had not been the mastermind after all. In fact, Robert had been manipulated by Lily and her accomplice. While Robert had agreed to the plan and was complicit in the fire, it had been Lily's ambition, combined with the manipulative influence of her secret ally, that had truly orchestrated the devastating event. Lily's desperation for freedom had pushed her to do something unforgivable, and the lives lost in the fire were the tragic consequence of her decisions. As the final pieces of the puzzle fell into place, Robert was left in shock as he learned the full extent of Lily's betrayal. He had been used, just as much as Emma had, and now both he and Lily would face the full weight of the law. Lily was arrested and charged with conspiracy to commit murder, and the third person, the fire expert, was found and taken into custody as well. In the end, the fire that had devastated so many lives was revealed to be the product of greed, manipulation, and a tragic web of lies.